The New Orleans Saints would be the biggest winners if Derek Carr decides to come out of retirement.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, what is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're answering the biggest questions around the potential return for Derek Carr to the NFL. If the quarterback wants to unretire, we're going to break down what it means for the Saints salary cap situation, the type of return they could get, teams that could be interested. But we're going to start everything off with what matters most, which is this a real opportunity? And the answer seems to be yes. We got all that for you on this bonus episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us this time, making us your first listen and being it every day or here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. Thanks for helping us get here as we bring you your team every day. The New Orleans Saints would be the biggest winners if Derek Carr indeed decides to unretire and come back to the NFL. Let's start with why the Saints would be the biggest winners, because I'm going to tell you right now, there's real smoke here. There is absolute real smoke here. NFL teams that are in need of a quarterback, of which there are more than there are going to be available quarterbacks via the draft or via free agency that teams will feel comfortable with. Teams want this to happen, right? There's real interest here. Now, the biggest question will be, does Derek Carr actually want to come out of retirement? Is there a situation that will coerce him and persuade him to leave the comfort of home and the comfort of the podcast studio with his brother and go back out on the football field? That is the part that, of course, remains unknown. But considering the fact that he's apparently been working and throwing and that there's no more limitations with that shoulder that forced him into retirement in the first place, allegedly, the answer seems to be quite likely that he would want to return. So yes, there is and appears to be actual smoke when it comes to all of this. Whether or not there's fire, that remains to be seen. But if this ends up happening, the Saints will be the biggest winners. Well, let's just call it what it is, all right? If Derek Carr returns to the NFL, the Saints could end up, you could be entitled to compensation. Like they could end up getting compensation back for him to go and land with whatever team. The reason being is because they still own exclusively his playing rights because he retired as a New Orleans Saint while on contract through 2026. So for the rest of this season, the Saints right now own the exclusive rights to his contract. So if he decides to unretire, if a team decides to help him come out of retirement, the Saints could say, okay, we're going to make this happen, but said team is going to have to send us said picks in order to get you, right? So it kind of think about it as the player equivalent of what happened with Sean Payton. When Sean Payton stepped away and then came back and he was still under contract, the Saints were able to trade him to the Denver Broncos in exchange for a first-round pick. The Saints will not get a first-round pick for Derek Carr, but the Saints would be the biggest winners because they get something out of this. Derek Carr gets back to the game, which could be a big win for him, but the team that gets him, who knows what kind of play they're going to get, right? Typically speaking, and I would say even more than typically speaking, most of the time, the majority of the time, that when somebody misses a full year of football, they're usually not great upon return. And so the team that's getting Derek Carr probably isn't necessarily going to get the top level Derek Carr that's been seen to this point through his 10 plus years, right? Double-digit years in the NFL. But I think teams will expect that they're going to get something pretty good. Many teams are going to look at those first two games of the 2024 season when the Saints offense was lights out with Clint Kubiak and Derek Carr and hope that they can get that same level of production out of them. And we have to remember, ego runs the NFL. Ego runs decisions in the NFL. Every team believes they're going to be able to get the best, if not better, out of Derek Carr than what the New Orleans Saints got at the peak of what Derek Carr was here in New Orleans, which was short-lived, but it was there, and it was there enough for NFL teams and their egos to go, I bet we could do better than that, right? They'll ignore all the bad stuff and try to build off of the good stuff because they think that they'll be able to get that. And that's great. That's fine. That's dandy. And that works super well for the New Orleans Saints. Now, there are several teams that could potentially be in the mix here in terms of those that might be interested in Derek Carr. So next, we'll break down who it is that could potentially be interested in Derek Carr, what the Saints can get back, and how it impacts their salary cap. Let's get to that as we continue on with this bonus episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The Winter Olympics are here, and there's no better way to get in on all of the games this offseason than with our friends over at FanDuel. You can get the drama of the curling matches, the physicality of all of the hockey matches, the speed of speed skating, and much more. It's going to turn the Winter Olympics into a must-watch for you over at FanDuel. Everything from individual events to medal counts. For instance, right now, the U.S. second place in terms of odds, plus 250 for most gold medals, plus 360 for most medals in total. You can get in on all of that and more with our friends over at FanDuel.com today, who are making the Winter Games a can't miss for you. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow along with them than with our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Once again, you can find all of that over at FanDuel.com today. Today's episode of Locked On Saints also brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. If you're hiring, remember this: Indeed is all you need. Stop getting bogged down and lost in the sauce with all the other job postings out there. The job that you're hiring for is important. So make sure that it gets the placement that it deserves based on that importance by using Indeed sponsored jobs. Those sponsored jobs, by the way, according to Indeed's data, that are posted immediately and directly to Indeed are 90% more likely to report hires than non-sponsored jobs. So don't miss your opportunity to get your job out there today. Spend more time interviewing the candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results by using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to this show can get $75 in sponsored job credit and give your job the premium positioning that it deserves by heading over to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. That's Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's bonus episode, right? Our additional episodes here with a look at some of the potential callers when it comes to those that might be interested in quarterback Derek Carr and trying to bring him out of retirement. We've now seen more and more reports, even as this Monday afternoon has gone on, that have kind of linked the Saints quarterback to a potential return for to continue on with his career. And so for me, three teams really, really stand out. And look, I think that there's one team that's out there too that a lot of people are going to draw connections to, but I'm going to tell you right now, don't take the bait. The three teams that make the most sense are the New York Giants, the Arizona Cardinals, and the Minnesota Vikings. There's no doubt in my mind that those are the three teams that make the most sense. The Indianapolis Colts are in there and a little sneaky as well, as a team that actually did check in on Derek Carr before they before they signed. I'm thinking about Indeed, you know what I mean? Before they ended up signing Phillip Rivers to come back in and beat the Super Bowl champions or the eventual Super Bowl champions. And there's some lack of clarity at their quarterback position because of the injury to Daniel Jones and all that. So it makes sense that the Colts would be a part of this conversation. But for me, it's the Cardinals who are looking for some type of palate cleanser post Kyler Murray. It's the Minnesota Vikings who have major question marks around JJ McCarthy. Is he good? Is he not? Is he going to be what they need? Is he not going to be what they need? So on and so forth. And then the New York Jets, who, even though they have a new head coach and they have a new general manager from the beginning of the 2025 season, they still have Woody Johnson. And Woody Johnson likes to call some shots here and there. And I think Woody Johnson likes Derek Carr. Remember, when Derek Carr signed with the Saints, it was the Saints and the Jets were kind of the last two players in that conversation. And so those three landing spots plus one in terms of the Indianapolis Colts make the most sense. The one that does not make any sense at all is the Las Vegas Raiders. And a lot of people are going to tell you that it makes sense because Clint Kubiak, former New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator, is now the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. That was made official on Monday evening. And the Carr brothers, Derek and David, made some jokes about it on their podcast. But it seems very unlikely that the Raiders are going to go for this kind of nostalgia play here. They've got the number 1 overall selection in Fernando Mendoza on the way. If they need a bridge quarterback or a veteran quarterback to start the first few games, they still have Geno Smith, who has $18.5 million guaranteed in his 2026 contract. It does not make sense to ship off more draft capital to get Derek Carr to eventually be Fernando Mendoza's backup. It doesn't make any sense. It could still happen. We never say never when it comes to the NFL, but the Jets, the Cardinals, the Vikings, and then the Colts all make a little bit more sense as of right now. I've said this on the show before. This will be no surprise, but my expectation in terms of what you can get back for a Derek Carr, who has no future in the organization, who you have no trade leverage with, right? You have leverage in the other stuff. You don't have any leverage in terms of trade because he has no future here in New Orleans, and who has been away from the game of football for the last year, is that at best you're going to get a package of day 3 picks. And those day 3 picks could be in 2026, they could be in 2027. We'll see. It depends on what the teams are offering. But day 3 picks is probably the best. I don't think you're going to get better than what you got for Rashid Shaheed, a 4th and a 5th, for Derek Carr. And I know that sounds preposterous because he's a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. But like I said, he's been away for over a year. He's got an injured shoulder, or a shoulder that forced him into retirement, quote unquote. And the Saints have no leverage in terms of him having a future in New Orleans. Because it's not like they can just say like, oh, yeah, we reinstated him, but we'll keep him if you don't give us what it is that we want for him. No one's going to buy that, right? You only reinstate him if there's already a trade partner in place. So that's my expectation there. Probably some day 3 picks when it comes to that. But that's still good because you can use those day 3 picks to move elsewhere in the draft, or to potentially move up in the draft, or you just stick and pick. Like, this is a deep enough draft class, and we've heard the Saints talk about how much they love the depth of this draft class already. That could make a lot of sense. Salary cap wise, not a lot of impact here, right? Dead money's already dead money. Money saved is already money saved. It's not like the Saints will all of a sudden take on a $30 million hit all over again if Derek Carr were to show up and be unretired all of a sudden, right? And the Saints decided that they would do that. And again, the Saints control that entire situation. And so if there were to be anything negatively impacting them and their ability to be able to crawl out of this salary cap situation, which is finally on the horizon for them, they just simply wouldn't activate him from the reserve retired roster or list, excuse me. They just simply wouldn't make that decision. It would just force him to be retired for another year, and then he can make his own decisions after his contract expires. But that's where the Saints own all the leverage. And so the money that's saved is already saved. That's not going to flash back on the books. Even if it did, if you get it done before the new league year, it wouldn't matter anyway. And then on top of all that, there's just, if it's going to be bad, don't do it. Like, it's a pretty simple situation. That's where the Saints absolutely control the leverage in this situation. So there you go. Salary cap implication, what the Saints can get back, teams that could be interested, why the Saints would win. We covered it all here for you in this easily findable episode, bonus episode, on Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. In tomorrow's episode, our full episode of the show, we'll dive in a little bit more on what the Super Bowl taught us about Tyler Shuck and the New Orleans Saints quarterback situation, which is patience, young one, patience. We'll get to that next in tomorrow's show. We appreciate you very much. As always, make this a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me in the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson Nola, Nola. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.